So welcome everybody. My name is Pim van Baarstaal. I'm CEO for the Sales and Technology Cluster. We have another webinar today, hosted by Rob Munro from the Institute of Manufacturing from Cambridge University. So we're very pleased to have Rob. This should be a very interesting session, all about road mapping technology. So we'll hand over to Rob in a moment. As per usual, if there's any questions, we have a question and answer session at the end. So either give us a physical wave on the screen or use the raise hand functionality if you want to ask any questions, or indeed the chat function. That's all fine. I think Rob has a slight interactive element in it as well, so be prepared for that, and hopefully you can engage. As I mentioned, we're recording the session and we'll share Rob's contact details as well as the presentation, as well as the recording with you all afterwards. So there's plenty of opportunity to engage with Rob further in the end if you need to, and then obviously ask any questions if you don't have the opportunity today. Obviously, as I said before, this is part of a series, and we do a whole host of these. So we have another one coming up next week, and advise you to check that out. It's all to do with investor readiness and funding and things. So that should be a very interesting session. So please have a look at our events page on the website, and obviously sign up for any of the events that you and the webinars that you're interested in. All our webinars are recorded and are on YouTube. So if you want to catch up with any of the ones that we've previously done, please do go onto YouTube and search for Sales and Technology Cluster, and you'll find all our content there. So please engage with that. So that's pretty much it for me. For now, I'll hand over to Rob, who will take us through road mapping for technology. So Rob, over to you, please.
Okay, thanks very much, Pim. Okay, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here and speak to you today. I've entitled this talk, Mastering Road Mapping for Effective Innovation. Some of you may be familiar with road mapping. In fact, you may be users of road mapping or being part of a road mapping workshop. And that's how to get started for some of those who may be thinking about it. Maybe you haven't thought about it, but might be inspired to start. And for those of you who have already undertaken some sort of road mapping, you're already doing that in your company. Now, how you might go about building the capability and getting more from that. So I'm with the Institute for Manufacturing at Cambridge University, and the Institute for Manufacturing, I would say, is a world centre of excellence in strategic road mapping, and it's developed that over time. So the talk will last, I'll be speaking for about 35 to 40 minutes. As Pim mentioned, there's an interactive element. So as a question in a few minutes' time, I'm going to ask you about your experience of road mapping. And at the end, we can just open up the microphones and you can ask your questions about that, anything that's on your mind, things that you want to have a discussion about. So very happy to stay on to comfortably get you through the hour. First of all, though, let's have a think about innovation and innovation management. For company leaders, managing directors, CEOs, and so on, they're really looking for where is the new growth going to come from. They're concerned about all sorts of things. Technology and strategy is but one of those things. And so what we want to try and do is make that concern easier and lift the worry out, if you like, of where those new products, processes, services, solutions, the value creation for the future. And road mapping is a way to do that. For, let's say, R&D people, technologists, engineers, scientists, and so on, they might be thinking, how do I make sense of technologies, new technologies coming into the business? How might we improve our capability or performance? And how might we link that to the concerns of the business leader? And really harness the capability of the organization to, coordinate its efforts around innovation. So I hope to give you something that you can take away today. There's a couple of downloads through the presentation, and if you can't get them through the presentation, get them afterwards, and you could start tomorrow making some progress on that. But first of all, I wanted to introduce you to a few of my friends. Let's call them the innovation heroes for the day. So first of all is Daniel. So he's a vice president in an organization supplying the automotive sector. His particular concern is how to build new momentum into the product pipeline. He wants to know what's the link between new technologies and those commercial gains. He wants to know how the portfolio of those activities might be coordinated and make them less, let's say, short-term or incremental in nature. John, in a growth SME in the materials sector, supplying automotive or any number of sectors for that matter where materials are important, is looking for new growth opportunities, new technologies, and new applications for those things. But the pain point for him is, how do I articulate those commercial gains with the R&D programs and create buy-in from the board, from other members of the company? Anna runs, quite popular now, the Corporate Innovation Centre. There's some 400 around the world now, looking into what's called white spaces, opportunities where none yet are sailing, let's say. And might want to think about how to engage existing or potential new users of the centre. Wants to be able to describe a vision for opportunities, get more people to use the centre, more signings to realise its full potential. And lastly, Jamie runs a national standards agency. He's responsible for technological standards in passenger safety and wants to work out how the best return on those, let's say, innovation products or the programs can be demonstrated and really back the right projects to fund. Now, if you look at all of those people there, they've got a few things in common. They work in organizations. There's some complexity to those organizations. Therefore, it needs some sort of coordination that needs to occur. They also, to some extent, want to create buy-in for their innovation activities, for their research programs, for their development programs. They might want to get investors on board. And to be able to, in a sense, tell a better story about those innovation activities. And strategic road mapping is a way to create and tell a better story, in other words. And so with that commonality in mind, we can kind of move on to have a think about how we might take advantage of this. So in the chat box, I want you to, well, first of all, have a think about these questions. And I'd like to sort of get a sense of who's been involved in road mapping activities before, who has, you may say yes or no in the chat box. You may want to say, you know, what was the nature of your involvement? Were you a participant? Did you design a process? Did you facilitate it? Were you a stakeholder in that process? You know, what were you involved in? And also, what was it for? Was it for products, technologies, research, or strategy? What were you aiming to do if you were involved in that? Or if you haven't been involved, what might you want to do with road mapping? So if you could just enter into that box, and Pim's going to scan the chat box as well, and just sort of pick out some any key points there that have emerged.
For those of you unfamiliar, if you mouse over the screen at the bottom of the screen, you should get a little bar with a number of different functionalities. One of them is chat, so click on that, and then obviously engage in answering Rob's questions if you can. Thank you.
So we have a yes as a stakeholder. Thank you. If nobody else has put yes, do I infer that the rest are no's?
I can see 3 yeses so far.
Okay. So road mapping for products and suppliers from Richard, thank you. Nearly all of those activities, yeah, okay. The nature of the involvement.
There's also somebody has joined as a facilitator, looking after products as well.
Okay, I'm seeing there also, you know, it's for technology, it was for research strategy, fantastic.
Yeah.
IP is an interesting one. Yeah, there's particular ways in which road mapping can be specifically used for IP. And standards, yes. So you might recognize some of the persona then at the head of the presentation. If there are any more points, otherwise we'll just close that chat down and I'll move on. So thanks very much.
Yeah, it seems to be a fair amount of activity, so it's good. Thank you all.
Okay, so I'm going to, you may have a question in your mind, which is, why bother with road mapping? You know, or if you have, what was the link between doing things like strategic thinking, let's say road mapping, and company performance? Now, because many of you, I suspect, have been involved in R&D and innovation for some time, you'll probably know the name Bob Cooper, or at least you'll know that Bob Cooper developed that kind of stage gate, phase gate type system, which is used to take ideas through a process and ask questions at the gates and either confirm or reject the next stage. And Bob Cooper looked into the performance of companies in the best category and the worst category, best performers, worst performers, across a number of strategic planning, new product introduction types areas. And in the first one, there was a clear spread between the best and the worst around objectives around product innovation. So the best performers were having clarity of that compared to those in the worst categories. That your product innovation or innovation in general is part of the business strategy. Is a clear spread there and a nice demonstration, I think. That the long term, they had a longer term perspective rather than the short term, perhaps within the year results. Very, very nice spread there. And these strategic arenas, they decided where they were going to play with their products and solutions in the marketplace. Not so much of a spread, but still, you know, the best performers are clearly stating where it is we're going to innovate. And also that strategic product roadmaps are in place. Now, you may have some of these and you're getting benefit from that. You may have them and you're not getting the benefit that you're looking for. And that will be an interesting question for the end, I suspect. So there's more evidence than that. It's a short presentation today. Hopefully you've got some thoughts out of that, perhaps some conversations you could take away to have in the business and convince people who are unconvinced. So the Institute for Manufacturing, some nice pictures of Cambridge here, with King's College Chapel there, and no doubt you visited. It's not that far away from the Gloucester area. So the Institute for Manufacturing has been in existence for, well, since the 1980s, really, when it was formed by Professor Sir Mike Gregory. And you should take the impression that although there's some nice pictures of spies there, it's an organization that really is making impact in the world. And we talk about this concept of big M manufacturing. And you can read it there for yourselves. But the main message there is manufacturing is just, it's so much more than the making of the thing in the factory. It's about understanding the technologies out there and potential and the innovation potential. It's about the systems and processes that companies use, you know, also within the factory clearly. It's about operations and it's about supply chain distribution as well. So, you know, what happens outside of the factory is very much as important as what happens inside the factory. And actually for governments and government agencies, those who are interested in economics and policy might want to know what are the levers we can pull to improve a region, a sector or a nation's prospects. IFM is trusted by hundreds of organizations, government agencies around the world, and has advised on all of these things. But one way in which we work is when there's an industrially relevant problem that comes along, and you might say road mapping and innovation management is an industrially relevant problem, IFM will do some research. The academics will work on unpacking that topic, usually working with other industrial companies who want to get a leading edge. And to be able to then unpick, unpack, and then turn that into practice, and the practice we then take out through our knowledge transfer business that I'm a member of, to companies who want to get an improvement. And we do that through research, through training, and knowledge transfer projects. That's IFM, that's all I'll say about that. So, if you've been involved in roadmaps, some of these images may look familiar to you. And I just pulled these out of Google and assembled them. You can see that they're some highly visual documents, and that's, I think, one key way of thinking about a roadmap is a visualization of strategy. And you can see some really quite creative solutions. You can see at the bottom there, space exploration has been kind of described. There'll be below that graphic a lot of detail that engineers, scientists, and business people can then use. And sectors, so rail industry, automotive, any sector you care to imagine has really looked at and developed these. And there are a number of research reports out there that you can go and access and get a sense of how might road mapping be used. Sort of maybe a bit of inspirational thinking there. So let's have a think about what the features in a roadmap should be. A lot of documents. There was a document actually produced by the government recently, which describes itself as a roadmap, but there isn't a roadmap in it. So the language can be a bit of a problem. It might be just a plan or a report, but there are some things that a roadmap must contain. I'll come on to that in a moment. A few minutes, where did it come from? Where did road mapping come from? Some research done a few years ago now. Actually, if you look at the left-hand side, you can see the US government was getting into road mapping, strategic road mapping. Actually, it was around management of government debt at the time. And you can see the number of publications on that, virtually none for a significant period of time, very long induction period. Then actually Motorola was the first main industrial to pick up road mapping and start to use that within the organization. Then you can see other organizations, Philips, United Nations, Scandium Laboratories also. And you can see the number of publications of use and research on road mapping that's increased over time. So a long tail of adoption, but now firmly part of the innovation management landscape. This is an image of Motorola's, and Bob Galvin, the CEO, came in, wanted to understand how can I cut through the complexity of new technology? How can I coordinate my business's activities to deliver a series of products over time? So here's an image of a first and rudimentary roadmap, and some features there. It's on a single page, and you can see all sorts of pieces of information there, but you can then have a conversation about that roadmap. Time is a key dimension. Usually it runs from left to right. It can run from right to left if you're looking backwards in time. It's a way in which roadmaps can be used as a how did we get here analysis, if you will. You can see a number of technologies or technological enablers there that needed to be put in place over time in order for the products at the bottom, the things that create value, to be launched and enabled into the marketplace. So there must be a value generation activity within a roadmap. And you can see the march of those technologies over time and new forms of value through the products that Motorola were releasing. Okay. So some of that research undertaken by a key researcher at IFM, Dr. Rob Munro, has kind of taken over the last 15 years those early ideas about road mapping to develop some underlying principles. What makes road mapping work? And so let's have a little glimpse into that, call it the lens of road mapping. Again, features and structures of a roadmap. So you can see at the top there, from now into a longer term vision of the future, you can see three main bands running left to right, kind of top layer, market and business, middle layer, product systems, so on. And at the bottom layer, technology, science, and resources. And it's a way of answering key questions. Where do we want to go? What's our vision? Where are we now, honestly? And how do we get there? What are the options for closing the gap? You can then think about why, what's motivating our change? What's the nature of our response? What are the products, the services and the systems that need to be launched and into play? And how are we going to enable those things? What technologies? That's where the science comes in, and other resources, the collaborations, the funding, the facilities. You'll be familiar with push-pull kind of strategies, so pulling from the market to the products with a very strong demand is a motivation for a roadmap. You can also push. We've got some great technologies. What can we possibly do to enhance value generation in our products and our services? You can look at it from the point of view of viewing perspectives, kind of this lens metaphor. Let's say, people who can care about commercial, strategic matters in the business. You can think about, kind of design, production people, and about technology R&D people, research people in a company. So they'll have different and unique perspectives. But what we're trying to do is really connect these together. We're trying to understand drivers, strategy, what's the competition doing, and how do we therefore respond? And what should that form and function be of those solutions we're going to launch into the market? Where's that value? And also thinking about, what are the capabilities we need for those projects? Do we have them? And actually, what do we need to grow, and what might we need to reduce to focus our resources correctly? And you can see different bars, lines, and interlinks there. And what that's saying is, this information interacts over time, it interacts together. Nothing should stand alone when you're describing the results of a roadmap. So they're the key features of roadmaps. So when you're saying, looking at something, reading a report, for example, is there a picture with these kind of features in there? In our research plans, is there a picture that's describing these kind of features? Because we're in innovation, you'll appreciate kind of the use of metaphor, where a landscape is a large, high-level, picture of a terrain, lots of features on the landscape. And in the context of a road mapping exercise, you bring large groups of people together, or relatively large. You're looking at want them to share perspectives and bring their ideas forward. And then the stuff they do bring forward. But on there is something of particular interest, and the landmark is something we're going to probe and dive deep into. And so in the context of a workshop for road mapping, you've got maybe small group activity, groups of 3 or 4 people with interest and expertise on a particular topic that might be a priority. Thinking about sharing their expertise, capturing that, and starting some first plans. Now, we sometimes call this fast start, kind kind of 1-day workshops, 2-day workshops, that sort of thing. And it's not to get the perfect answer, but get a starting answer and do it quickly so that the businesses can make progress. And this is a good routine, a nice routine, I think, that companies can take on board. So what does, innovation is really about people, their knowledge, their interests, their behavior, their leadership, all of that mix. And you start to think, what does it look like inside a session, let's call it a workshop. And on the top left, you can see on the wall a very large poster with lots of post-its involved and people in front of that putting their information there, making sense of it, trying to look for connections and finding areas of interest, priority. And so you can obviously see other sort of images there that are capturing people sort of thinking, taking pause for thought, listening, being guided by facilitation or self-facilitating, as in the case of the bottom right, where, if you like, and the bottom right is the landmark. And so you've got a group of 3 people working out the priority area that's been merged from that landscape. And through doing that, you're able to make good and quick progress on a particular topic area, whether it be to reef pipeline of innovation ideas for products, or to explore new technologies like digitalization, or try and help a company become more sustainable through new processes. A potentially vast range of motives for considering road mapping. So if you wanted to get a roadmap or undertake a road mapping exercise, what things might you need to think about? Having clarity of the purpose of the roadmap. What is the motivation? That's a really great starting point, I think you'd agree. And that sort of cascades into the kind of scope and outcome. So what do you draw a line around? What's inside this roadmap and what's not inside it? What do we deliberately exclude? And what outcomes? It might be a motivation to recharge the pipeline. It might be a motivation to create an engagement for use of the Innovation Centre, for example. You might then need to think about, who are the stakeholders in this roadmap? In the chat box, at least one person said, I was a stakeholder in this, or I was involved in all of this in terms of delegation, being a delegate within the road mapping workshop, or I facilitated as well. So, you've got to sort of kind of put a bit of structure around people engagement there. And in terms of structure, what is the process to get people into the room, select them, give them a task to do, and then get them working on those kind of activities we saw in those photographs. And on templates, and I'll provide you some links to these in a minute, we use and have developed templates as a way to quickly guide people through their workshop activity. And it's there to take away process worry, if you like. So I'm an engineer. I like to think a lot about process, and some of you might sort of recognize that. But so what are we doing in this workshop? Well, actually, we've taken that away from you. Please, use your creative energy and effort and complete a template to make quick progress in a day of a workshop, say. And after the workshop, you'll have potentially raw information, good quality information, but how do you make sense of that? You'll want to validate it. Take it back to the people involved, the teams, the delegates, other people, other stakeholders. You might want to then create a report of some sort that can then be issued. Looking for funding, if you're looking for resources, these are the outcomes, and this is the messages I want to provide from the road mapping process. So these are the things to have a think about. Some templates I promised you. You preparing your delegates for a particular question to invite them to a workshop. And you can see the key features of the roadmap. So it's got time from left to right. It's got different layers. of different types of information from the market and the customers, potential value creation, and enablers and technologies. And you may say, give us your best ideas on this topic. And delegates will do that offline, bring it into the workshop, make quick progress. There's a URL at the bottom there, so you click on that. There's a website, actually Rob Fowler's website. There's loads more material about road mapping, underpinning that, some more templates for you to use and download for free to help you get started. And in those yellow boxes, so you may say, I've got an idea for a solution that can add some sort of value, a product. And it's driven by some need, some change that's coming. But actually we need some technology and some other enabler, some other resource or a facility or a partnership to make that solution happen. So that's how you take that template and put an idea in place and get your delegates to go wild, think about, be creative about their thinking, bring lots of ideas forward, and you're likely to get a good one. You are then faced with a challenge. So if you think back to that in front of a large format poster with lots of post-its on it, how do you make decisions about what's important? And what we're trying to do is shift people from subjective, sometimes quite political and personality-driven decisions to make it as objective as we can. And by doing that, we're able to potentially come up with a better decision basis for high potential ideas. And think about this in two dimensions. There's a series of factors around opportunity or benefit, and you can sort of read into that and say, well, market size is important, or market growth is important, or profitability per unit is important. These are the things that are important for this activity, this workshop. Then you may say, well, okay, how feasible? Can we do it? And then you get into product differentiation, IP, somebody mentioned in the chat box before, some sort of fit to the sales distribution channel. These are important for this workshop today. And you can select these factors from a long list and design them that way. And it helps the delegates make meaning of how do we want you to decide on something that's important. Then you can plot that on a 2x2, opportunity and feasibility from low to high. Then you can see some green circles, amber and red circles. So those ABC, or ACD I should say, are both seen as high opportunity and high feasibility, and we should probably do them without thinking more about it. You've got then some amber circles there, which potentially high opportunity. We're not sure about the feasibility, but don't exclude them. They may be quite breakthrough ideas with something that the business doesn't currently do, but if we could make it happen, it is a high business benefit, it's a high opportunity. You can see a URL at the bottom there, and if you click on that, it'll take you to a download site, so you put in your name and email to get that. But you can get a 8 or 10 page guide about how to do that that I've written. You can also display, clearly ideas are uncertain, and those lines between, let's take A at the top there, there's a range of answers to opportunity and feasibility. And if you take B, that's quite interesting because B could either be very unfeasible, actually, or quite feasible. We're not sure yet. And the nature of innovation is we have to work on that uncertainty. Got to live with it, embrace the uncertainty, if you will, to allow the best idea. So there's a template there for you to download, a guide for you to download. Also for download is a template. If you remember back to that picture of workshop delegates, you had 3 gentlemen sitting on a table around a poster, and they were filling that in, and that's what they were using here. And let me just sort of This is a template that takes away, if you like, the process worry from delegates, if you will, to put it that way, to really think about information to capture on this high potential idea, explore and refine this high potential idea. And you could do this in a 90-minute session very easily. And you can see a number of features on there, green lettering, step 1, step 2, step 3, again to help delegates, if you will, self-facilitate. You can see some grayed out features, and we put these into really just provide little mental clues, cues and clues, you know, around markets or applications, or have you thought about an option, say in step 4, that you hadn't thought about before. So you can then you know, download that and use it. How would you use it? Well, you know, groups of 3 and 4, post-its out, write down solutions or answers to those questions. Then step 2 to 3 to 4, which is different options, and something about assumptions, uncertainties. And in that way, you're able to very quickly explore and refine a high potential idea, and potentially develop that further outside the workshop, and then build a business case, a preliminary business case about it. Again, it's sort of fast starting type methods. So go to that link, download that, and there's 3 templates and a guide for you to make some progress on. So let's have a think about some examples. I've got 3 organisations that have worked on road mapping to embed that, almost to make it cultural, you know, what we do around here. I guess everyone's familiar with Lego, and actually it's quite an inspiring mission that, you know, they're talking about developing and inspiring the builders of tomorrow. You know, imagination, creativity, and fun. You know, and you can then see how products have evolved, and I can certainly relate to the one on the left, having had boxes and boxes of that as a boy. Through up to the right-hand side, you know, kind of co-branded products with Stranger Things. My daughter's a fan of that. But what they were looking to do was these things around alignment and establishing coordination across functions. They were looking to kind of take their unique capabilities and build on those, as well as develop new ones and be able to say why. They were looking to start with a pilot, if you like, and then gain acceptance, having shown the success, and get more traction in the organization. And so, you know, I'll say it again, you know, start small, iterate, you know, start with those templates, get going, make some progress, get some business value from this presentation today. And then, you know, you can roll that out, you can extend it, expand it, make it, build it into the system of innovation management, you know, how we do things around here. And there is an approach for those of you who are already doing road mapping to kind of roadmap the roadmap. Seems a bit strange, but it's about all of the things you need to put in place to make road mapping something of how you manage innovation in the organization. You know, cultural change, if you will. What we do around here is road mapping. In a second example, so we've all heard of BASF, the chemical company. So as large organizations do, they reorganize themselves every few years. And so the next incarnation was bringing teams of researchers and developers together in a thing called segment portfolios. And this is a quote from the head of innovation in the construction chemicals business. You know, believe it or not, you know, they're so focused on tactical day-to-day issues that worrying about the pipeline has become difficult. But you have to be able to think strategically and tactically. And lessons learned from that was, you know, how do you institutionalize this into the DNA of the business? Well, you know, make time for strategic thinking. You know, plan when there's time to plan. Make sure you do. Wouldn't it be unforgivable to be late to the party? in the insights, they thought, well, how can we include customers into the process? Now that might be something you can do or not do, but at least getting some of those insights, injecting into the road mapping process would be a good move. And then you get into the fitness, building muscle, if you like, and systemizing it, selecting practitioners that you're going to invest in doing road mapping, facilitation and design, and building champions. I'm just about to embark on a training project for a large materials company to do just that. Mapping might come up in strange places. I bet you're familiar with the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, nearly 200 years old, charity. And I looked up that they, over that time, saved 140,000 lives, which is just utterly remarkable. But with new technologies coming into place, you know, what would the 10-year roadmap look like for rescue? A colleague of mine developed with them, and you can see a highly visual document there. Again, it's on a page. It's got time running from left to right. It's got a vision. Where do we want to be? What would good look like? And you can see different you know, trends there. You can look at some of the gaps and opportunities, what the service and solutions might be, and the technologies. And it's a fast-moving field. So using road mapping, they were able to engage other organizations in search and rescue. They were able to identify some technologies that they can go and trial kind of now. And they then were able to start using, you know, drones for casualty rescue in hazardous locations. So, you know, it's not manufacturing, it is services, it is technology, and you can use it for that. So, Rob, where can I start, you might ask? Some resources and actions for you potentially. There's a book that you can buy by Rob Munro, the researcher at IFM Cambridge. There's the downloads. Again, there's the link there. You can go and have a look at those. And you know, we do run courses, so you can go and, you know, will we ever be back in a room? I expect so, but I don't know when. You can go and book yourself onto a course. So we're also doing virtual courses on that. If you wanted more evidence, go and look at the case studies on the IFM homepage. You know, if you're a company and you want to discuss further, you might want to talk about, you know, how do I start? Or I've already started, but how do I improve? How can I get more impact? Then my email address is there, my contact detail. Very happy to have a conversation with you about that. So coming to a conclusion, I hopefully have inspired some different, through use cases, ways in which road mapping can help organization do that alignment, that coordination, communication job. You know, how you can quickly start, how you can use templates to become more efficient and effective if you're already doing it. But I think, you know, as a tool within your toolkit, as an innovation manager, let's say, or a business leader, it's you know, I'd say a pretty essential part of that toolkit. So you know, I would only encourage you to, you know, take the first step or take more steps if you've already done that. So that's all in terms of my formal talk for you. Very happy to take any questions you have. You know, it might be how to get started, how to implement, or how to embed it if you've got some obstacles there, how to improve. And you can contact me on those various methods there, email, connect with me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter as well. So how to think about those questions. Pim, I guess we might have something popping up in the chat box, but also we can come off mic and we can just have a conversation about anything that's on your mind about this.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Rob. I mean, obviously, we would encourage anybody to ask any questions that might have. I'd like to start with one, if I may. In some of the images that you showed, it looked like, you know, there's quite a lot of people involved and all that sort of stuff. I mean, would you recommend, you know, going through this whole exercise with like the entire department or the entire company, or is it something that you might want to limit to like more senior management or your technical staff or something like that? How do you see that? What advice would you give?
Well, it's a depends question, I think. You know, so you know, let's say there's. I suppose it depends on the scope. What are you trying to achieve with your roadmap? So if it was, you know, strategic about the future of the company, then certainly senior managers or those people with information about that topic would be involved. To give you an idea of scale of workshops, you can do this from, you know, 5 people to 100 people. Okay, it becomes a logistical challenge, but that's very doable. If you were thinking about, say, product pipeline, you may say, well, we certainly need people with strategy, competitive knowledge, and company strategy in the room, the right people in the room, and where we want to go as a company. We need people who understand the marketplace and therefore be able to, if you like, articulate what value would be in the product. What are the customers seeking and wanting? And you'd also want to have, you know, technology people. You may want to have human resource people to say, well, okay, if this is a big shift for us, what are the kind of capabilities we're going to need in the future? So yeah, it depends on the question to drive that, Pim.
Excellent, thank you. We've had a question in from Toby saying many roadmaps go off course. To what extent do you need to take into account external factors and worst case scenarios? How often do you need to review the roadmap? Well,
that's very good. I had 2 words that caught my attention: scenarios and review time period. It may be that we don't know what the world's going to look like, and you know, right now the world looks kind of very uncertain in certain sectors. So you can build this kind of scenarios approach. You may select, you know, the world in 4 different states, or the market in 4 different states, and build a roadmap for each of those, and then integrate it back together to look for the, let's say, similarities and differences. That's a very effective way of dealing with uncertainty. And in terms of time period, I suppose to some extent depends on the, again, the motivation. If you're doing this at the start to get, so I was called in by a fast-moving consumer goods company. By July, we need to submit our R&D program for next year, and it was June. Help us do that. So that was a very fast process, if you like, to get to those answers. And then it was a case of, okay, now we've done, we don't need to do it again. But the motivation changes. If your market or the technology is changing quickly, you need to think about what's the review cycle that you need to be following. Hopefully I touched on that question at least.
No, excellent, thank you. I mean, Chris brings a very topical thing, because obviously, you know, we are where we are today, and if you want to do this exercise right now with more than 6 people, obviously, you know, you can't do that physically. So any thoughts on how to best go about doing this remotely and stuff? Are there?
Yeah, very much. Well, back in March, we were just about to start a big materials-based road mapping exercise. And within a week, we'd, what do they say, pivot from 4 face-to-face workshops in London to an online process. So that was the challenge, but you know, huge learning. And I think now, you know, 6 months on, we can firmly say how you can organise that. And to some extent, it makes it easier and difficult. You know, you have to break down 1 or 2 days into 1 or 2 hours, particularly if you're doing things over Zoom or Microsoft Teams. But that's down to the design of the process. And some delegates like that. They like that time in between to think things through. But yeah, it's very doable. And I think we've got experience to be able to describe how to show that.
So you can always break it down in packages and give people homework and then come back to
what key point I would say is, you know, when you're having an online session, you've got to be very specific about what you're doing. You know, clear object. It's basic. It's almost basic meeting organisation going back to that from years ago. But you've got to be quite sharp about like particular tasks. Not too much because it's an online environment, and also you're not face to face. You're screen to screen. Not too demanding, let's say, in terms of cognitive loading. We want to get through the process and come up with creative solutions, get the right answer.
Excellent. I'll stop the slide now because I hope people have got the details, and we'll be sharing them with everybody later on anyway. A couple of more questions. So Richard raises an interesting point in terms of how do you encourage people to think about the future? I mean, a lot of people, you know, kind of think day to day or struggle to think what's next. Any thoughts on how to get people to throw their vision a bit further?
Yeah. It can be a problem, and for some organisations, it's more problematic than others. They might be designed to think short term, so that's quite hard to pull them out of that. But you pull them out of that. Here's a few thoughts. You know, by designing the question and the process, by designing perhaps different ways of working through, and you know, helping. You may inject sort of, let's say, intelligence from the marketplace that they haven't thought about into the process. You may bring in external experts who help stretch the thinking, and you may demand, we don't want anything about the short term, we only want the medium term to longer term. So there are some levers that you can pull to, you know, start to, I mean, it's a bit of an exercise, isn't it, in moving from the short term to the medium term. And then also selecting criteria for ideas. You know, we want breakthrough.
Yeah, and I suppose also, as you know, if this is an exercise from management to do with the rest of the team, is to actually give them a very clear future vision and say, look, guys, that's what we want to achieve in however many years. You know, your exercise is to think about how to get there and kind of like break it down in steps, and maybe that will help people to bridge that, you know, really big vision into smaller bite-sized chunks, I guess.
Very good. I mean, I've just seen a question from Martine in the chat box. So large organizations can have independent departmental roadmaps. Yeah. How can roadmaps be integrated into a more holistic organizational approach? Well, partly the design of the roadmap should demand cross-functional information and design and input by its very nature. So you can then deliberately pull, you know, the innovation, the business, the technology people. Essentially, to some extent, those are the three layers of the roadmap. You deliberately pull them in. If you really wanted to go further and start breaking down barriers, then, and we like innovation strategy, it's giving us business results. How can we get more out of that? And that's perhaps road mapping the roadmap. And then it becomes a bit of a change program that you then got to keep on top of it and go back, monitor, how are we doing? And so that's one way to answer that, but also bringing in other tools that you've already got in the organization for thinking about innovation and strategy, or other ones that, you know, I can talk about at length, but haven't had the time today to bring that in to create a holistic organizational approach.
And I suppose also, because one of the things that occurred to me is that, you know, you could probably technology roadmap, you know, for specific sectors or for specific markets or products that you're looking for. And once you've done that and you've got your 5 markets or 5 products or sectors, and it, you know, there you roadmap all the stuff that you need for that, it's then almost like a vertical roadmap to kind of go like, right, what do we need to do as a business to make sure that we hit all of those things? So it's kind of both a horizontal as well as a vertical exercise, if you want to do it in that sort of way.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, I don't know the size of the organizations on the call today, but you may think about layers of road mapping. So you may say the top layer of the roadmaps, at the next layer down, guided by the top one. And then you've got the next layer down, which are individual product lines, perhaps. And so you can have a stack of roadmaps that all kind of integrate to each other. Now that sounds complicated to some extent, but it doesn't need to be. you can design a process which is very time efficient to look at the top, the middle, and the bottom, and then use that as maybe some energy for change to keep the roadmaps going.
Excellent.
We didn't talk about digitalization of roadmaps, but there's quite a lot of software tools now that you can keep roadmaps alive. But it comes with a caution, of course. You've got to know where you're starting from, where you're going towards. Just talking with a company the other day, should we embed software? They've decided not to do that because we've just asked some probing questions, or at least not yet.
Fair enough, all makes sense. I'm conscious that we've arrived at 12 o'clock. I just wanted to make sure, if anybody has any further questions or anything they'd like to ask or comment on, obviously now's the time while we have Rob in the room. So is there anybody else that wants to bring in anything, either through chat or conversation?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I wondered if there was any difference you see in the way large organizations, like more corporations, construct their roadmaps relative to smaller organizations.
Well, the similarities and differences. So the similarities are, you've still got why, what, and how. The different layers, you've still got time.
Yeah.
Differences might be, we're a big company. We need quite a lot of thinking across different technologies and market areas.
Mm-hmm.
So if you like, the numbers and potential complexity can start to build up, yeah, compared to a small company. But essentially the same principles are there. It's a kind of a modular approach, thinking about the same design factors when you're thinking about your process. Yeah, we can talk more about that. If you've got any questions, by all means, email them to me and I'll respond to you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, everybody on the call here will receive Rob's details as well. So there's plenty of opportunity to engage with Rob afterwards if you wish. I kind of think we need to leave it there because we've arrived at 12 o'clock, and I'm conscious that obviously people have lots of different things on, but there's lots of opportunity to engage with Rob afterwards if you want to. So Rob, thank you very much. I thought it was incredibly insightful and interesting. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I would encourage people to have a go at it and obviously follow up with you if they can afterwards.
Fantastic, thank you.
In terms of wrapping things up, I mean, as per usual, I'd like to run a small poll with everybody. Just to get your feedback on what you thought of today's session, but also to let us know what you want from us in the future and what topics we can cover, because we very much intend to keep this going. So if you wouldn't mind, completing that, takes about 40 seconds or so, so it shouldn't be the end of the world. So I'll take the opportunity to thank our YouTube audience for watching. I hope you find it informative. As I said before, please check out future events on our event page at silversandtechnologycluster.com. And obviously check out our YouTube channel for future or for past workshops rather that we've done. So thank you very much for watching, and hopefully see you again